In the vast expanse of the universe, there are three constants: entropy, terrible coffee, and bureaucracy. King Zorn, the magnificent self-proclaimed, of course, had mastered at least one of these constants, having built the most bloated bureaucratic nightmare this side of the Andromeda galaxy. His royal portrait adorned every government building across 12 star systems, a face so punchable that assault rates increased 300% wherever it was displayed. Today, Zorn slouched on his crystalline throne, his seven-fingered hand propping up his oversized head as General Klax delivered the morning briefing. "Your most spectacular majesty," Klax droned, his three eyes blinking out of sync, "our quantum scanners have identified another potential Baba Yalez host." Zorn straightened immediately. "Where?" "Earth. A backwater planet in System 8752Z. "Another one?" "That's the third this decacycle. Are you sure your scanners aren't just picking up those ridiculous Earth cooking shows again?" "Negative, Your Magnificence. The signature is unmistakable, according to legend." "I know the legend," Zorn snapped. "One day Baba Yalez will return, overthrow the established galactic order, blah blah blah." He waved dismissively. "So who is it this time? Another warrior? A genius scientist? A charismatic leader?" Klax's tendrils wiggled nervously. "Actually, it's an elderly human female. Lives alone. Occupation, retired librarian." "A librarian?" King Zorn howled with laughter. "That's who's supposedly going to overthrow me? An old bookkeeper?" "The prophecy doesn't specify occupation, sire." "Whatever. Send the extraction squad. I want this threat eliminated by dinner. I'm having Centaurian dignitaries over, and you know how they love a good execution." Meanwhile, on Earth, specifically in suburban Nebraska, Maggie Blackwood was having a typical Tuesday morning, which meant she was cursing at her coffee maker, shouting at her cat, and preparing to terrorize the neighborhood. At 76, Maggie had perfected the art of cantankerousness to such a degree that it could qualify as performance art. Her silver hair was perpetually styled in what she called a practical bob, but what looked more like she'd cut it herself with garden shears, which she had. Her wardrobe consisted entirely of floral house dresses and orthopedic shoes that announced her approach with a distinctive squeak thump that sent children diving behind bushes. "Bartleby," she yelled at her enormously fat tabby cat, "stop judging my coffee. Like you could do better with these arthritic hands." Bartleby yawned, displaying a stunning disinterest in both Maggie's coffee-making abilities and her complaints. Maggie shuffled to her front window and peered through the curtains. "Right on schedule," she muttered as a bright-eyed jogger bounced past. "Who looks that happy at 7 a.m.? Definitely hiding something." She grabbed her broom not for sweeping, but for emphasizing points during inevitable confrontations, and headed to her front porch. Her domain. Her battlefield. What Maggie didn't know, as she settled into her creaky rocking chair, was that 73 light-years away, an extraction squad was prepping their ship for the jump to Earth. And what the extraction squad didn't know was that they were about to encounter the most terrifying force in the known universe, a senior citizen with nothing left to lose and a lifetime of accumulated complaints. Maggie spotted neighborhood kids cutting across her lawn. "Hey, use the sidewalk. That's what taxes pay for." The children scattered like startled birds, one of them dropping his backpack in terror. Just another Tuesday for Earth's crankiest woman. Just another Tuesday for the unsuspecting host of Baba Yalez, the cosmic entity of chaos and retribution. By noon, Maggie had successfully terrorized the mail carrier, bills first, junk mail never, scared off 2 door-to-door-to-door salespeople, and engaged in a 40-minute argument with her neighbor about property lines that ended with her threatening to bring out the surveyor's map. "Harold, don't test me." She was just settling down for her afternoon ritual, watching game shows and loudly guessing all the answers wrong, when her living room began to shimmer. "Lasted rolling blackouts," she muttered, reaching for the emergency flashlight she kept wedged between sofa cushions. That's when her roof disappeared. A beam of pulsating light engulfed her, and Maggie felt herself rising from her armchair, Bartleby and all. The cat, impressively, didn't even wake up. Most humans, when faced with sudden levitation and house deconstruction, would panic. Maggie Blackwood was not most humans. "Put me down this instant," she bellowed into the light. "I have leftover casserole in the oven." Aboard the extraction vessel, Commander Drix stared at the monitor in confusion. His antennae twitched nervously. "She's yelling at the tractor beam," he said to his second-in-command, Officer Plex. "Most specimens lose consciousness or eliminate waste in fear." Plex tilted her head. "Perhaps her brain is too primitive to understand what's happening? Scan her vitals." Plex ran the scan, then double-checked the results. "Commander, her heart rate and stress levels are normal. Actually, they indicate irritation, not fear." "Impossible." "Hello? Space people?" Maggie's voice crackled through the ship's comm system. "If this is about the satellite dish, I told the company I won't pay for channels I don't watch." Drix stared at the monitor. "She thinks we're cable providers?" Maggie and a still sleeping Bartleby materialized in the ship's holding cell. She immediately took stock of her surroundings: metallic walls, strange glowing panels, and a distinctly antiseptic smell. "Well, this isn't Nebraska," she declared, depositing Bartleby onto the floor. The cat stretched, entirely unfazed by interstellar travel. The holding cell door slid open, and Commander Drix entered, flanked by 2 guards with plasma rifles. With gray, rubbery skin, oversized eyes, and stick-thin limbs, they resembled what would happen if a child tried to draw an alien after eating too much sugar. "Human female," Drix began formally, "you have been selected for termination by decree of His Magnificence, King Zorn the—" "Did you take me through the ceiling?" Maggie interrupted. "Because I just had that fixed after the hailstorm, and Medicare doesn't cover alien abduction damage." Drix blinked all 4 of his eyes in succession. "You will be transported to the Royal Execution Arena, where—" "And another thing," Maggie continued, approaching Drix with her finger raised, "you don't just beam people up during the Price is Right. It's disrespectful." The guards raised their weapons as she approached, but Maggie simply pushed past them to examine a control panel. "What are all these blinking lights for? Seems excessive. Your electric bill must be astronomical." She paused, then cackled at her own joke. "Astronomical. Get it? Because we're in space." Drix turned to Plex, utterly bewildered. "Is she insane? Scans indicate normal brain function for a human. She's just old and cranky," supplied one of the guards, who quickly straightened when Drix glared at him. Maggie was now poking at the cell door mechanism. "This craftsmanship is shoddy. My grandson could build better, and he can't even assemble IKEA furniture without crying." Something strange began to happen as Maggie critiqued the ship's interior design. The lights flickered slightly. The temperature dropped a few degrees. And unnoticed by everyone except Bartleby, who watched with typical feline knowing, Maggie's shadow seemed to stretch and distort against the wall, almost as if it had too many limbs. "Enough," Drix finally snapped. "Secure the prisoner for hyperjump. We reached the royal palace in 3 Earth hours." As the guards approached with restraints, Maggie fixed them with a look that had made grown men apologize for crimes they hadn't committed. "Young man, if you put those handcuffs on me, I will make whatever this King Zorn has planned seem like a day at the beach." The guard hesitated, then looked to Drix for confirmation. The commander nodded firmly. As the restraints clicked around her wrists, Maggie smiled for the first time since being abducted. "You really shouldn't have done that," she said quietly. "I was actually starting to enjoy the change of scenery." And somewhere, in the quantum fabric between space and time, something ancient stirred and yawned, awakened by the indignation of an old woman who'd never taken crap from anyone, not even aliens. The royal palace of King Zorn wasn't just big. It was the kind of overcompensating monstrosity that screamed, "I have deep-seated insecurities about my tentacle size." Spires of iridescent crystal stretched toward 3 different suns, while gravity-defying waterfalls flowed upward along its exterior. The entire structure rotated slowly, ensuring that everyone within a 50-mile radius was treated to its ostentatious glory. Maggie, now fully shackled with what appeared to be glowing blue energy cuffs, was marched through corridors lined with portraits of King Zorn in various heroic poses, most involving improbably large muscles and expressions of noble suffering. "Who's the narcissist?" she asked, jerking her chin toward a particularly grandiose painting of Zorn wrestling what looked like a cosmic squid. "Silence, prisoner," Commander Drix hissed. "You stand in the sacred halls of—" "Sacred my foot," Maggie snorted. "I've seen DMVs with more charm. And why is it so cold in here? Do you people not believe in central heating?" The truth was, it wasn't cold. In fact, the palace maintained a perfect 74 degrees at all times. But ever since they'd landed, Drix had felt an inexplicable chill that seemed to follow the human woman. They arrived at massive doors carved from what appeared to be a single enormous gemstone. The doors swung open automatically, revealing the throne room, a cavernous space dominated by a floating platform where King Zorn reclined on a throne made of what he claimed was condensed starlight, but was actually just really expensive plastic. "Your Magnificent Majesty," Drix announced, dropping to one knee. "We have brought the human female identified as the potential Baba Yalez host." King Zorn leaned forward, his seven-fingered hands gripping the armrests of his throne. Up close, his portrait-perfect features were somewhat diminished by what appeared to be cosmic Botox gone wrong. "This?" he said incredulously. "This is the great threat to my reign? She looks like she couldn't threaten a sandwich." Maggie squinted up at him. "And you look like you've had work done. Not good work either." A collective gasp rippled through the court. Nobody spoke to King Zorn like that. Nobody except, apparently, elderly librarians from Nebraska. Zorn's face flushed purple with rage. "You dare insult the most powerful being in 12-star systems?" "Honey, I've insulted better men than you before my morning prune juice," Maggie replied. "Now, are you going to tell me why I'm here, or should I start critiquing your interior decorator's choices? Because whoever picked that chandelier should be shot." From the shadows near the throne, someone snickered. Zorn's head whipped around. "Who laughed?" "Who?" A figure stepped forward, tall, with the same general features as Zorn but younger, with an expression of permanent amusement etched on his face. "Sorry, Father, but you have to admit, she's not what we expected." This was Prince Rex, Zorn's son and heir, also his greatest disappointment, primarily because Rex had developed the unfortunate royal trait of independent thought. Zorn glowered. "Perhaps you'd like to explain to our guest why she's here, since you find her so amusing?" Rex bowed slightly toward Maggie. "My father believes you're the host of Baba Yalez, an ancient cosmic entity that supposedly threatens his rule. So he's going to have you executed. Standard procedure, nothing personal." "Executed?" Maggie repeated. "For what? Being old? If that's a crime, you should lock up half of Boca Raton. For potentially harboring the spirit of chaos." Zorn thundered. "The only spirit I harbor is whatever's left of that sherry in my kitchen cabinet," Maggie retorted. "Though I could use a nip right now, if you're offering." Rex grinned, earning another glare from his father. "Take her to the detention block," Zorn commanded. "Execution at dawn." As Maggie was led away, she called over her shoulder, "Dawn on which planet? Be specific. I have standards about when I get executed." The detention block turned out to be less block and more slightly uncomfortable hotel room. Maggie immediately began rearranging the furniture, complaining about the lighting, and demanding to know where her cat was. "Your feline companion is in royal quarantine," explained the guard, a gelatinous blob named Glurp. "Well, he needs his special food or he gets gassy," Maggie insisted. "And nobody wants that, trust me." Within an hour, Maggie had 1. Convinced Glurp to bring her tea. 2. Critiqued the prison uniform so thoroughly that she was allowed to keep her house dress. 3. Organized a complaint system for the other prisoners. 4. Started a betting pool on whose execution would be most spectacular. The guards were baffled. The other prisoners, hardened space criminals and political dissidents, were taking direction from her. And strangest of all, the security cameras kept malfunctioning whenever they tried to record her. What none of them realized was that with each passing hour, as Maggie's irritation grew, something was awakening within her, something ancient, powerful, and extremely petty. Night fell on the royal planet of Zornopia. Yes, he named it after himself, and Maggie sat cross-legged on her prison cot, eyes closed, breathing deeply. To anyone watching on the security monitors, which were working intermittently, at best it might have appeared she was meditating, finding inner peace before her execution. In reality, she was mentally cataloging every single complaint she'd ever had, from the rising cost of canned peaches to the way young people text during conversations. Insufficient leg room on airplanes, she muttered. Reality television. People who say espresso instead of espresso. Automated customer service. With each grievance, the temperature in her cell dropped another degree. The lights dimmed slightly, and in the shadows something stirred. Prince Rex appeared at her cell door, dismissing the guards with a casual wave. "You're a peculiar human," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Most people facing execution don't spend their final hours criticizing the thread count of prison bedsheets." Maggie opened one eye. "When you've lived as long as I have, kid, you earn the right to be particular." Rex studied her curiously. "Do you know what Baba Yalez is?" "Sounds like a discount furniture store." "It's an ancient entity. The legends say it embodies the universe's collective irritation, all the minor grievances and petty annoyances compressed into cosmic power." He paused. "It incarnates once per millennium in a living being, usually one who's—" He searched for a diplomatic word, particularly attuned to life's frustrations. "You mean cranky," Maggie translated. "Essentially." "Me. And your daddy thinks that's me?" "I'm flattered, but I'm just a retired librarian who doesn't suffer fools." Rex stepped closer. "The thing is, Baba Yalez doesn't know they're Baba Yalez until they're threatened. It's a defense mechanism. The power awakens when needed." As if on cue, the lights in the corridor flickered violently. Somewhere distant, alarms began to sound. "That's been happening all day," Rex said, looking concerned. "System malfunctions all over the palace. Started right when you arrived." Maggie smiled thinly. What a coincidence. On the other side of the palace, King Zorn was having a meltdown. Literally, his favorite solid gold commode had somehow melted into a puddle, right as he was using it. "What is happening?" he bellowed, hopping on one foot while servants tried to help him into a new pair of royal pants. General Clax burst in, then quickly averted all three eyes from the royal posterior. "Your magnificence. The quantum scanners, they're off the charts. The human female, her Baba Yalez energy signature is growing exponentially." "That's impossible. She's just an old woman." "The legends never specified age, sire. Only that Baba Yalez embodies cosmic irritation." Zorn paled. "And we locked her in a prison cell with uncomfortable bedding and bad food. After abducting her during her favorite television program," Clax added unhelpfully. Back in her cell, Maggie was now hovering 6 inches above her cot. Her eyes had gone completely black. Her silver hair floated around her head as if underwater. Most concerning of all, she was smiling. Miss Blackwood?" Rex said cautiously. "Are you feeling all right?" "Never better, dear," Maggie replied, her voice overlaid with something ancient and distinctly annoyed. "I've just had an epiphany. For 76 years I thought I was just a cantankerous old bat. Turns out I'm a cantankerous old bat with cosmic powers. Isn't that something?" The cell door crumpled like paper, twisting into an abstract sculpture that vaguely resembled a hand flipping the bird. "Now then," Maggie said, floating past a stunned Rex, "I believe I have an appointment with your father. Can't be late. Being punctual is one of my few remaining pleasures." Throughout the palace, chaos erupted. Security systems went haywire. Doors opened and closed randomly. The royal portrait gallery rearranged itself so that every painting of King Zorn now depicted him with a comically tiny crown and an expression of constipation. Maggie floated down the corridor, Rex hurrying alongside her. Guards who attempted to stop them found themselves suddenly wearing their uniforms backward, or speaking in high-pitched squeaks, or, in one particularly unfortunate case, transformed into what appeared to be a disgruntled flamingo. "You know," Maggie said conversationally to Rex as they approached the throne room, "I always wondered why I could never find matching socks after doing laundry. Think that might have been early manifestations of cosmic chaos powers?" "Possibly," Rex replied, ducking as a decorative vase sailed over his head and smashed against the wall. "Though that happens to everyone, cosmic entity or not." "Fair point." The throne room doors blew open with a thunderous crack. Inside, King Zorn had assembled his elite guard, all wielding weapons that hummed with deadly energy. At the sight of Maggie now floating 3 feet off the ground, her house dress billowing dramatically, the shadows coiling around her like living things, several of them dropped their weapons and ran. "Baba Yalez," Zorn shouted, trying to sound commanding despite having retreated to stand behind his throne. "I command you to leave that human vessel and return to the cosmic void." Maggie snorted. "Command me? Honey? I haven't taken orders since 1973, and I'm not about to start with a man wearing what appears to be a bedazzled bathrobe." With a flick of her wrist, Zorn's crown lifted from his head and dunked itself into a nearby decorative fish tank. King Zorn, now crownless and increasingly panicked, barked orders at his remaining guards. "Seize her. Use the quantum dampeners." Too brave, or possibly just very stupid, guards rushed forward with devices that looked like high-tech super soakers. They fired beams of rippling energy shooting toward Maggie. Without even blinking, she raised one arthritic hand. The beams froze mid-air, then transformed into streams of butterflies that swarmed the guards, getting caught in their helmets and sending them stumbling around blindly. "I spent 40 years telling teenagers to be quiet in libraries," Maggie said, advancing on Zorn. "Did you really think your light show would intimidate me?" Rex had taken a seat on a decorative planter, watching the scene unfold with undisguised glee. "I'd surrender if I were you, Father." She turned Officer Ziplock into a flamingo. "I will not be defeated by a geriatric Earth woman," Zorn declared, though his voice had risen to a somewhat less than majestic squeak. Maggie rolled her entirely black eyes. "For Pete's sake, I'm not here to defeat you, you melodramatic space gecko. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be fertilizing those hideous decorative plants." This gave Zorn pause. "You're not here to overthrow me?" "Overthrow you? Please. I can barely overthrow the lid on a pickle jar these days." Maggie floated closer until she was eye level with the king. "No, I'm here to teach you a lesson about respect, particularly towards senior citizens and their television viewing schedules." With a casual wave of her hand, King Zorn rose into the air, dangling helplessly as his royal robes fluttered around him. "Here's what's going to happen," Maggie continued. "You're going to stop randomly executing people because of some prophecy you don't even understand. You're going to start actually ruling your kingdoms properly instead of just putting up narcissistic portraits everywhere. And most importantly," she brought Zorn's face close to hers, "you're going to institute a galaxy-wide senior discount program. 20% off everything for anyone over 60, regardless of species or planet of origin." Zorn blinked. "That's it? No cosmic destruction? No regime change?" "I'm 76, not a revolutionary. I don't want your job. It seems exhausting, and the outfits are ridiculous. But the prophecy said I'd bring change," Maggie finished for him, "not destruction. Learn to read the fine print." From his perch, Rex applauded. "I like her version better, personally." Maggie smiled at the prince. "You seem to have a sensible head on those alien shoulders of yours. How do you feel about community service programs?" "I find them admirable," Rex ventured. "Excellent. Because your father is going to start one, personally." In fact, she waved her hand again, and Zorn's elaborate royal garments transformed into a simple jumpsuit with community service emblazoned across the back. He's going to spend the next year picking up trash on various planets, starting with Earth, Nebraska, specifically. My neighborhood could use some tidying. This is outrageous, Zorn sputtered. I am a king. And I am cosmic irritation personified, Maggie replied calmly. Want to see what happens when I get really annoyed? I once made a cable company representative cry just by sighing into the phone. Zorn deflated visibly. 1 year? He asked meekly. 1 year, Maggie confirmed. And you'll keep all your portraits, your throne, and most of your dignity. It's more than you deserve, but I've got bridge club on Thursdays and can't be bothered with completely restructuring galactic politics. With another wave of her hand, she gently set Zorn down. His crown, dripping with fish tank water, floated back to his head and settled there with a wet squish. Do we have an understanding, your sogginess? Zorn nodded glumly. Excellent. Maggie turned to Rex. Now, young man, I believe I was promised an execution at dawn. Since that's clearly off the table, how about breakfast instead? I'm partial to waffles. 3 weeks later, life in suburban Nebraska had returned to something resembling normal, if your definition of normal included an alien prince helping with garden work, and the former monarch of 12-star systems picking up litter along County Road 16. Maggie sat on her front porch, sipping tea and watching King Zorn struggle with a particularly recalcitrant piece of garbage that had wedged itself under her mailbox. Put your back into it, she called. Cosmic ruler of the galaxy should be able to handle a stuck Doritos bag. Zorn muttered something unroyal under his breath but doubled his efforts. Inside the house, Rex was attempting to teach Bartleby tricks. So far, the cat had successfully trained Rex to provide treats on demand, which was more progress than anyone had expected. MS. Blackwood, Rex called through the open window. Your communication device is making noise. It's called a phone, dear, Maggie replied. And if it's Gladys from Bridge Club, tell her I'm indisposed. She still owes me $6 from last week. Life as a semi-retired cosmic entity had its perks. For one thing, Maggie never had to worry about the thermostat anymore. Her home maintained a perfect temperature through sheer force of her irritation at energy companies. For another, her garden had never looked better, though the fact that her tomatoes now glowed slightly after dark was something she chose not to examine too closely. The neighborhood kids still ran when they saw her coming, but now it was less about fear and more about the fact that sometimes objects around Maggie would spontaneously rearrange themselves when she was in a mood. Last Tuesday, Mrs. Peterson's garden gnomes had formed a conga line and danced down the street when Maggie walked past after receiving an unsatisfactory haircut. Your Majesty, Maggie called to Zorn, who was now wrestling with a tangled grocery bag in her rose bushes. When you're done there, the gutters need cleaning. Mind the ladder, it's a bit wobbly on the left side. I commanded armadas, Zorn grumbled. I conquered the 7 nebulae of Zexaltor. And now I'm cleaning gutters. Character building, Maggie replied cheerfully. Besides, think of the great portrait opportunities. King Zorn the Humble, Gutter Edition. Rex emerged from the house, Bartleby waddling behind him with imperial feline dignity. Father, I've been thinking. After your community service, perhaps we could implement some of those reforms we discussed? The Galactic Council seems quite receptive, especially after MS. Blackwood sent them that strongly worded letter. Letterhead, Maggie said sagely. Always use good letterhead when threatening cosmic entities, but makes an impression. Zorn sighed dramatically. I suppose some changes wouldn't be catastrophic. The senior discount program has actually been quite popular. Turns out most species live long enough to benefit eventually. A shadow passed overhead, too large to be a bird, too silent to be a plane. All three looked up to see a sleek spacecraft hovering above Maggie's red maple tree. Right on time, Maggie noted, checking her watch. The Andromean ambassador is very punctual. I like that in an intergalactic dignitary. The ship's sleek ramp extended, touching down precisely on the division between Maggie's property and the Harold's next door, a subtle cosmic middle finger to her neighbor's continued insistence that her fence was 2 inches over the line. "You're meeting with the Andromeans?" Zorn asked, genuinely shocked. They haven't had diplomatic relations with anyone for 3 centuries. "They reached out after hearing about our little adventure," Maggie explained, rising from her rocking chair with a series of creaks that might have been her joints or possibly the fabric of reality adjusting around her. "Apparently they've been having issues with space pirates near their nebula. Thought I might have some suggestions." "And do you?" Rex asked. Maggie smiled, her eyes briefly flickering to solid black before returning to their usual steely gray. "Oh, I have thoughts on pirates. Just like I have thoughts on people who don't return their shopping carts to the proper area. Very similar moral failing, if you ask me." As Maggie shuffled down her garden path toward the waiting spacecraft, a neighborhood kid's ball bounced into her yard. Normally, this would have triggered a lecture on respect for property boundaries that could be heard 3 blocks away. Instead, Maggie paused, tapped the ball with her foot, and sent it rolling back to the wide-eyed child watching from the sidewalk. "Just this once," she called. "And tell your mother her casserole recipe needs more oregano." The child nodded vigorously and fled, clutching the ball. At the bottom of the spacecraft's ramp, Maggie turned to Zorn and Rex. "I should be back by dinner. There's lasagna in the fridge. Don't let Bartle be on the counter. He's not as reformed as he pretends to be." With that, Earth's crankiest guardian ascended into a spaceship, off to solve an interstellar crisis armed with nothing but 76 years of accumulated complaints and the cosmic power of a woman who had finally, in her golden years, found her true calling, professional universal busybody. And somewhere in the quantum fabric of reality, the essence of Baba Yalez, the cosmic embodiment of I Told You So, smiled in satisfaction. After a millennium of searching, it had found the perfect host, not a warrior, not a king, not a prodigy, but a cantankerous old woman who had elevated eye-rolling to an art form and could destroy egos with a single bless your heart. The universe didn't stand a chance,